I always knew when someone would come up to me and say, what was your favorite color of Gatorade again? And I would just know, like, we're doing some more running tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Ben Stiller.
I'm Adam Scott.
And this is Notes on a Scene for Severance Season 2. This is the first scene of season 2, picking up Innie Mark, the second after he said she's alive, and when he comes back to consciousness and he's in the elevator at Lumen with this new information. I remember asking you, like, what do you think your first instinct would be?
Yeah, and I just thought I would just run and try to find Miss Casey, who is Gemma in the outside world, tell her this information, see if she knows anything. I don't even think consciously has a plan of any sort. He just needs to find her.
That was sort of the impetus for the idea of the shot, and then it immediately made me think, well, we could do sort of an homage to our first Innie shot with Mark in season 1, where we meet him on the inside and he walks through all the hallways to get to MDR. So we thought, why don't we do like a souped up, version of this, running as fast as he can through all the crazy hallways of Lumens. So basically, this is like our Zolly move that we use to show the transition from Innie to Audi or Audi to Innie. If it's Audi to Innie, the camera's zooming out on Adam while it's pushing in to end up with a wider lens image of Adam. If it's going from Innie to Audi, it's starting in on a wider lens and going out and zooming in. So the camera's pushing back, but the lens is getting tighter. This is not something that we invented. Alfred Hitchcock used it in Vertigo. Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest shots in film history, in Jaws. And then what Adam does with his eyes. How do you do that with your eyes?
I just roll them back.
Right.
That was actually your idea. We did a lot of trial and error trying to figure out how exactly to portray this transition from Audi to Innie or vice versa. You had the idea of the eyes maybe rolling back, and that seemed to work, and we just eventually found it.
And there's your change in your sort of physicality from the Innie to the Audi or the Audi to the Innie.
The difference, I guess, between Innie and Audi Mark is where we started was Innie Mark is like 2.5 years old. Audi Mark has kind of the weight of the world on his shoulders and is just in this period of his life where he's sort of more kind of weighed down and
like me.
It doesn't have great posture.
Like anymore.
Like me too. I have terrible posture. And then Innie Mark is kind of brand new to the world and believes in this company and just is sort of everything's forward thinking.
And every time you would do the transition from Audi Mark to Innie Mark, I'd always kind of like do it myself.
You would?
Yeah, because I realized I have such bad posture. There was this piece of equipment called a bolt arm that we had actually experimented with in season 1 to do the severed transition and decided it was too big and kind of cumbersome. And it's a motion control robotic arm that can really do these precise moves with the camera. And it's a very big piece of equipment, but it has a long arm. And so basically this opening shot on Adam, if I was the base of the bolt arm, I'm here and it has an arm like this and it kind of goes around behind Adam as he walks out and pushes behind him.
It's huge.
Yeah, and it's scary because once it's programmed, you can't really stop it.
Right.
So there are a lot of safety checks you do beforehand. And
we had to rehearse it many, many times, so I knew exactly where to be at any given moment because this thing would just go right through.
Yeah, we don't like to use visual effects too much in the show in terms of creating backgrounds and environments, but we needed to for this shot because of the bolt arm taking up all this space. So really, like everything you see here behind Adam, this is all computer generated, and really when he comes out, that's all green screen behind him, and then the bolt arm's going around Adam's head here and then pushing behind him. This is all real, but then here all of this is all computer generated behind Adam also.
And you did that because you needed that room?
Because the bolt arm is over here and there's like a big piece of equipment the camera's on, so this all had to be recreated. Now right there is about where the transition happens to the next piece of the shot. So now we're on this sort of pogo stick gimbal that we had a great camera operator who was strong and tall and was running, chasing you down the hallway.
Why did you choose that rather than Steadicam?
It's just too hard to run this fast with a Steadicam because the Steadicam's connected to the waist of the operator on a whole gyroscope arm. It's very cumbersome. So
Right.
to run full speed, it's easier for a cameraman to hold a lightweight camera on a kind of a stick that he can just literally be running full speed, chasing you. And if it was the opposite, when he's running away from you, then he has to be holding it behind him. So
and he was going really fast.
yeah. That's what Jeff Richmond, our editor, called the Superman, where Mark opens up that. And we realized we had to pick a moment,
At some
right?
point, I had to unbutton the jacket.
Yeah.
And you were like, just do it on that first straight
We'll
hallway.
get it over with, because it's going to be a long run.
Yeah.
The 10 or so different pieces of this shot were done across 4 or 5 months, depending on when in the schedule we could fit it in with our specific setup of the hallway sets, because we usually keep all the hallways completely intact. It's almost like you're in a real maze of hallways. Our set is very claustrophobic and weird that way.
You often get lost on your way to set.
When we figured out what the run was going to be, we mapped it out on the sets that we have, sat down with Jessica Lee Gagne, our cinematographer, and Jeremy Hindle, our production designer, and started to think about how we could devise a shot that would take Mark through all these different hallways, this maze of hallways that we've never seen really, the route to wellness. And Jessica and I did overheads of what the different pieces of the run would be. Then we did what we call a previs, which is a sort of like a rudimentary animation of the shot. The visual effects team and us and our cinematographer, everybody, we all break the shot up into as many pieces as we need to complete it. We figure out, okay, for this part of the shot, there's no way we're going to be able to use a real set. We're going to have to pull out, all those walls. Yeah. So we know we can't do that part until we have time to do that. So we'll do that in February. And this part we can do next week because we already have the set.
I always knew something was coming when someone would come up to me and say, wait, what was your favorite color of Gatorade again? And I would just know, like, okay, I guess we're doing some more running tomorrow.
And now we're in POV and he swings around again on the pogo stick, pulling him. Right about here, it's gonna transition to this shot. So like this shot and this shot are different. Yeah. But you can't tell because our VFX people made sure to, fill it in between, but also not blur it so it feels like you're not noticing that it's a different shot. This is all real here, and then the second we come to right here, basically here now, this is all completely CG.
That's right.
Adam's running on a treadmill on a green screen stage with no set whatsoever. So the camera can actually get in front of him, but he's in place running on the treadmill.
And I actually had a harness so I could be running as fast as possible.
To match what you were doing in real life.
Yeah, and also just to not make it look like you're on a treadmill, because on a treadmill you start running at a set pace, but when you're running, even as fast as you can, your pace is constantly changing, and it's a little weird, little uncanny valley thing that a viewer, something would feel off and artificial about it if we hadn't kind of corrected for that.
Now we're back on our bolt arm, and the camera's going to do a crazy spin move around while Adam is countering going the other way to create this sense of just like, where are we?
Now that bolt arm, before when I stop and kind of look around, then look the other way as the bolt arm's kind of, that took a while, I remember, to really perfect.
Yeah.
And also it really helps just to do it over and over again, because what I wanted to try and do and what I think we achieved was with that kind of whip around and looking, and then when I finally kind of whip around and try to launch off and actually start running, it felt like we really wanted some momentum to start happening, and to have me and the camera kind of both be in sync to try and launch off together.
And the speed that this machine on the track had to have, because it's all motion control, which means the computer controls it, to really ramp up to your speed of running. That getting that timing right takes a number of takes.
A while,
breaking the shot up into different sections was really important, because once we had conceived of what it was going to be, it was really all about the logistics of getting the shot done.
There was a lot to shoot.
It's like, well, why can't he just be running down, a couple halls and turn around and then he's there? And we always felt that we really wanted to kick off the season in a way that would be exciting and fun and kind of give an indication of where we're going for season 2.
It almost felt like a side project to work on as we're making the season. Was all the more rewarding when we finished it. And we kind of had our own little rap party because it was like just a particular, like a group of people broken off from the main crew to come work on this thing. And so when we finally kind of wrapped it up, it was really fun.
Yeah. There's a guy back there who looks kind of like you, but not really. I can't see his face. The basis of this whole story is Mark's emotional life and his, trying to figure out how to become a whole person. And I think that's, ultimately the goal of the show, is to complete that journey with Mark.
Yeah, and the season 2 really kind of widens the scope of the show and widens the scope of the characters as well. Every character kind of goes through something new, and we learn more about each one of them.
Yeah, and that's why I thought the shot was important to kick off the season, because it felt like, all right, we're going to indicate to the audience that there's some new stuff happening.
Yeah.